Learn something? Did you eat any good Cuban food? Good. I know we had all of you go into the app to get download all the information, but we do have some printed programs still remaining outside. So if any of you would like a printed program, just go to the registration desk and we can give you one. Also, there was some problems with the evaluations on the app in that there was only one question. That problem has been fixed. If you can go back into the app and look at the sessions you went to and rate them again, that would be really terrific. I started off this training by saying that we were looking at hope in making things better for victims and also trying to focus on victims who have been very brave and fierce about getting their cases solved. The hope that we're bringing is through the power of DNA, and we have an expert and 2 victims of crime that DNA helps solve their cases. So without much ado, I wanted to introduce our speakers today. We have Joe Bloses, a retired crime scene detective in the New York City Police Department, and 2 survivors, Audrey Polk and Yvonne Pointer, who have turned unthinkable tragedy into personal crusades to highlight the importance of maximizing the potential of DNA technology to solve crimes and bring answers to victims. We're going to be hearing first from Joe. Joe was employed by the New York Police Department from 1979 until he retired in 2008. For 13 years as a senior sergeant in the crime scenes unit and as supervisors of the detective squad, he supervised the search, collection, and preservation and documentation of all types of physical and traced evidence. In 1993 and in 2001, he oversaw both crime scene investigations involving the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center. On September 2001, he was on the scene as both towers collapsed and was immediately assigned to Ground Zero until May 2002. Detective Bloses was most recently coordinated NYPD's BioTac DNA program, which expands the collection of DNA evidence to property crimes in addition to homicides and sexual assaults, and has identified more than 500 offenders to date. Joe?
Just about good afternoon, but it's still good morning. Good morning, everyone. Maya, I'd just like to thank you for your introduction. And before I proceed, I'd just like to thank Maya and her entire staff for NCVC for putting on such a fantastic conference, especially with the amount of people that attended since Wednesday throughout today. And I'd also like to thank each and every one of you for attending this session right now. I know we're kind of the end of the show, and we know it's getaway day, and you're going to be going home very, very shortly. But I know on behalf of myself, Audrey, and Yvonne, we thank you for taking time out of your day today to be here with us. As Mai said just a few moments ago, I'm a retired detective sergeant from the NYPD Crime Scene Unit, Forensic Investigations Division. I did nearly 30 years, 22 years within the Forensic Investigations Division, and crime scene was my life. And I'd like to talk to you this morning a little bit about the power of DNA, on where we were decades ago to where we are now, and what a powerful law enforcement tool it is today. It truly is the fingerprint of the 21st century. So if I can rewind the videotape back, let's talk about the mid-90s. Where were we with DNA in the mid-90s? And I'm going to use New York City as the example because that's where I was working. In the mid-90s, DNA was not very rarely used. It was used in specific cases. It was used in its infancy stages. It was used on select homicides. Very, very rarely was it used on a sexual assault back in the mid-90s. And in 1999, back then, the Commissioner Howard Safer selected myself and 2 others to travel overseas to London, England, to study DNA. To give you an example, back in 1999, the police department there from Scotland Yard took me out to celebrate their 1 millionth entry into their DNA database. Think about that, 1 million entries in 1999. Back home, we had a few thousand. That was it. So they were light years ahead, and we wanted to go there and assess their procedures and take back with us and try to implement them back in into the NYPD, and which we did. And I'm proud to say that since 1999 to the present day, to literally the day that I retired, we now do DNA evidence on every crime within the city of New York where it is applicable. We not only do it for your violent crimes of homicides and sexual assaults and robberies, but we do it routinely on burglaries, gun possessions, heavy-duty narcotics cases, car thefts. As long as it meets our criteria, we will use DNA as a tool to assist the investigation. That's another word that I'd like to talk about, is DNA being used as a tool. It provides the investigators with leads within that investigation. All leads must be corroborated during that investigation. Just because evidence is found in a crime scene or on a person, sometimes inside a person, it still needs to be corroborated. And in a few moments, I'm going to take you through different types of topics about the power of DNA and explain it a little bit more in detail. I'd like to start off by mentioning about what DNA actually is. And I'm not a forensic scientist. I'm just your Joe from New York City that worked in the NYPD that fell in love with forensics many years ago. DNA basically is what makes us who we are today as human beings. There's billions and billions of cells and nucleotides within our bodies that make us who we are. Forensic scientists today need 13 markers out of those billions of cells. And it's the job of the crime scene investigator to respond to a scene, to be able to recognize, properly document, collect, and package that DNA to assist in these investigations. DNA not only helps solve cases, but it links cases. Serial rapists, serial homicide offenders, serial burglars. We can go on and on and on. And I might as well tell you about quickly a little project that we started a number of years back called the BioTrax program. Mai mentioned that earlier on. We got a grant from NIJ that we wanted to implement DNA in routine burglaries. And back in New York in the early 2000s, if your home was burglarized, more times than not, the police will respond. They will take a police report. They will tell you to find out what your police report number is by calling the police facility and notifying your homeowner's policy that your home was burglarized. We elevated that to utilizing fingerprints at burglaries, and we tried to try to keep every burglary as a crime scene, and we utilized fingerprints. But then through this grant, we had the authorization and we implemented DNA from burglaries. The program was a huge success. We were able to not only show how crime has been reduced, but we were able to show through studies that the offenders that were being arrested for these burglaries use burglary as a crime of opportunity, and they graduate to higher levels of crime. So when I mention burglary as a crime of opportunity, it's an opportunity for rape and for homicide. So we were able to show that we had bad people committing burglaries, serial burglars, and I'll use the example of one case that we had where we had an individual arrested five times within 7 days for DNA recovered from those scenes. When the investigation was concluded, we determined that he was doing close to 330 burglaries per month. We were on a team that was able to, once we lock them up, we want to make sure that the DAs, the district attorneys, will prosecute to the fullest extent of the law, which they were all on board. So we wanted to put these individuals away for years so that they could not commit additional crimes within the city of New York. It was a huge success. When I retired, we had over 700 arrests just from the BioTrax program. Unfortunately, the day I retired, the statistics has stopped because they implemented that program into everyday work within the NYPD, and now it's part of the budget. So once I was out of there, I can't tell you what the statistics are now, but I can assure you that those stats have probably gone to probably 2,000 arrests with linking crime scenes from one to another, locking them up on 8, 9, 10, 12 counts of burglary, all through DNA. The 5 burglaries in one day, we got him on his sneakers, where a lot of times suspects will leave their sneakers at a location because they like the sneakers that they found in the house. So we can get the inside insoles with DNA. We can get it off of cigarette butts. We can get it off of knives, anything that is touched. We can now get DNA from food that is eaten within these locations. We got his DNA cells off of a scarf that he left at a scene, and sum and substance, 5 burglaries, 7 days, all related back to DNA. Cold cases. Cold cases are solved now through DNA. And what we tell our cold case investigators is you go back to your cases, you look what you have, and you try to answer the questions of who, what, when, why, how. And if you can't answer those questions through that case review, you have problems within your case. We want to look at the forensic evidence. Our technology years ago is not what it is today, so therefore could even resubmit that evidence and have it tested again, and we've had success in identifying those offenders within those crimes. There are evidence that was recovered from years ago, decades ago, that has never been analyzed, and we can look at it again and basically say, why not? A lot of times, DNA was not prevalent back in the 80s and the 90s, and you'll hear from Yvonne about that later on. But right now, in today's day and age, all we need is 10 to 20 skin cells on certain pieces of evidence to yield a DNA profile. Another investigative lead, a lot of times people don't hear of it and unaware of it, is it exonerates the innocent. And you're hearing this from a New York City police officer that will tell you that there are hundreds of individuals that are incarcerated across our country for crimes that they did not commit. And most recently, I'd just like to go quickly, just tell you about a case that just occurred no more than 2 weeks ago. September 2014, we have 2 individuals from North Carolina. Anyone from North Carolina here? Are you familiar with the case, what I'm about to tell you? And you're nodding your heads. And that's the power of DNA. We had 2 individuals, Leon Brown, Henry McCullum. They were jailed from the tragic rape and homicide of an 11-year-old female, Sabrina Bowie, back in Robertson, North Carolina. They were jailed for 31 years. They were 15 and 19 years of age at the time of their apprehension. Both confessed. Both have very, very low IQs. DNA from a cigarette butt suspect serving a life term for a crime similar less than 1 month after Sabrina's. A cigarette butt that was recovered from back then has now yielded these 2 guys to get out of jail. They're looking at this individual that's in jail, committing the same crime that he did to Sabrina less than 1 month, and he's in, and they're not sure if they're going to bring prosecution against him because he's already serving a life term. Prior to 2006, both incarcerated men witnessed over 42 executions in North Carolina. In 2006, the laws were changed concerning that death penalty. Back home, I know Barry Scheck, Peter Newfield, Barry more than Peter, very well from the Innocent Project. They do a fantastic job. They look at cases such as this. And they have studies that will show that 54% of the individuals that confess to a murder did not actually commit that murder. And I can go on and on with other exonerations, but this is the most recent from this month, let alone. I'd like to talk a moment about our rape kit backlog. That's a crime in itself across our country here today. Again, back from 1999, after I got back home from London, Commissioner Safer transferred me and put me on our rape kit backlog project. Any familiar with the rape kit backlog from New York City years ago? Anyone want to take a guess how many rape kits we had on the shelves unanalyzed? I'll tell you, 17,000. 17,000 kits were on the shelves. Prior to this time, the only time a rape kit would be looked at is there was an arrest. That's it. And Commissioner Safer finally took the bull by the horns and said, we got to correct this injustice. So again, we got, through the help of Washington, D.C., we got help through grants, and we were able to outsource these kits, and we were able to provide closure to the thousands of victims that were sexual assault victims. We had a statute of limitations in New York. We had to review these cases. I'm sure different states have different time limits, but in New York we had 10 years and we had to weed out those cases. But bottom line is, we arrested thousands of individuals for rapes that they committed from years ago, and additionally, subsequent rapes that they committed from that time forward. If we can take these perpetrators off of the street now and keep them in, it's going to reduce crime overall. By the time they are actually convicted on another crime, they could have committed another 15 rapes and, Lord knows, God forbid, additional homicides. And how do we do this? We do this through the CODIS system. And I'm sure you're familiar with the CODIS system, the Combined DNA Index System. It began in 1990. It's an FBI software program. That's all it is. It's administered forensic laboratories that are accredited through ASCLD and ISO, and we have CODIS administrators that have strict guidelines and regulations on what they can upload and what they can't upload into the CODIS system. But the structure of the CODIS system consists of convicted and arrested offenders, forensic unknown samples, missing persons, relatives of missing persons, and unidentified human beings. The architecture of it, it links crime scene from local DNA index systems to state DNA index systems to the national DNA systems. As of July 2014, there are over 11 million offender profiles within the ENDIS system. We have 2 million arrestee profiles with 254,000 hits, assisting in over 240,000 investigations. We're only in the infancy stages. There are laws and legislations that are across the United States that are trying to increase the database entries. Your database is only as good as what's in there. And one of these laws is the arrestee DNA law, Katie's Law by Jayanne and Katie Sepich, that we have 29 states on board, that when a person is arrested for a particular crime, depending on the laws within his or her state, they will be photographed, fingerprinted, and their DNA will be taken at that time. This all comes through the Debbie Smith Act. Are you familiar with the Debbie Smith Act? And most of you are nodding your head. Debbie and Rob Smith, they went through a traumatic experience years ago in Virginia. Debbie was raped within the confines of her own home, was doing her laundry, was grabbed from behind, dragged out of her house, dragged into the wooded area, raped repeatedly, was told that he would come back and kill her if she tells anybody. Her husband, Rob, is sleeping upstairs in their bedroom. He's a squad commander for the local police department. He finished doing a late tour. She wakes up Rob. Rob is taken back by this. Obviously, everyone's in a state of shock. Through the years, both were suicidal. Rob's taking care of the community, and he can't even take care of his wife in the sanctuary of his own home. Debbie was traumatized for years, in shock. found out that her rape kit sat on a shelf for over 7 years in Virginia. She was astounded by that. So hence she went through on her own endeavors with Rob and the Debbie Smith Act, where we get billions of dollars that are allocated across the United States for the Rape Kit Backlog Project. And this is a fantastic thing. It will help laboratories, jurisdictions resource to have them tested. It will assist in training district attorneys with money. It will assist the police departments in training for their evidence collectors so that everything is done properly and packaged properly. And I'm very, very happy to say that the Debbie Smith Act was passed late yesterday afternoon again in Washington, D.C. The Senate and the Congress have passed it. New York State, when we looked at our convicted offenders, we have a fairly good policy implemented now where all violent criminals have to submit their DNA upon their conviction. Not for arrest, but for conviction. And recently, a few years back, we instituted misdemeanors, petty larceny. Petty larceny is what we call petty theft, boosting. Someone going into a retail store and stealing a CD or stealing clothes, something that is not worth very much money. But since we implemented misdemeanor petty larceny into our state DNA index system, it has now solved over 1,078 crimes, including 57 homicides and 238 rapes from petty larceny. I implore you that if you can petition your state legislators, and when we have conferences across the United States, I talk about this, and we invite the local politicians in because a lot of them are naive about this. They have no idea. You'd be amazed how many local politicians do not know what DNA is all about. I can show you my DNA profile up on the screen, and it will reflect base pairs of numbers. That's all you'll see is numbers. If anyone would like my DNA profile, I'd be more than happy to give it to you because it means nothing to you. I'd be reluctant, anyone here I'd have no problem with, but I'd be reluctant to give out my private home address. I'd be reluctant to publicly give out my cell phone. But I'd give my DNA, I'd put it up on the web right now, no problem. My profile. And they don't understand the privacy laws of that. They really believe that it's an intrusion of privacy and they have to be educated on it, and that's what we're trying to do. Every one of us. So much of the faculty here this week understands DNA and what we try to do with that. Serial offenders, linking crime scene through CODIS, it's imperative. I don't even want to start telling you about the stories of the two wonderful women that are right here behind me. But you're going to hear about rape kit backlogs, and you're going to hear about serial offenders, and you're going to hear about evidence that was lost in transition through the years. That's not what this is all about. What we have to do is rectify those situations. And back then, I'd be the first to say that I've done over 1,000 homicides that I was in charge of in the city of New York. Did I make mistakes? Did we make mistakes at those scenes? Yes, we did. We're human. We all make mistakes, but we try to learn from our mistakes so we don't repeat them in the next investigation. If it means we have to change our training protocol, I will change my training protocol to make sure that those mistakes won't happen again in an investigation. Other uses for DNA besides criminal investigations. We're looking at human trafficking. Big-time problem now throughout the world, let alone here in the United States. Big time. And I understand, and Maya helped me with this, I think NCVC gives out webinars now on human trafficking and so forth and so on, which is a great, great tool to become aware of. Also, DNA is so important in paternity, SAT testing. They're now making kids submit DNA because of fraudulent identities. We have back in New York concerning paternity, and this is no joke. In New York, we have a van, it's called Who's Your Daddy? And you can submit DNA right on a street corner, right into the van where I'll have it tested for you. They're using it for fish barcoding, caviar, fake caviar being sold as expensive caviar. And last but not least, pet registries. Right here in Florida, poop, dog poop. You'll get fines. If you live in a community, you got to submit DNA from your dog, and if they find it in the dog poop, which they easily can, you'll end up getting a substantial fine. As in all New Yorkers, I love to talk. I spoke at a New York Minute. Unfortunately, my time has gone by. I want to thank you once again, and if I have the opportunity of coming back and speaking with you, by all means, I'd love to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. That was great. I'll be careful where my dog poops. Next, we're going to be hearing from Audrey Polk. She was born in Detroit. She was brutally raped in February of 1997 by an unknown assailant as she slept. 14 years after the horrific experience, a Wayne County prosecutor knocked on her door to tell Audrey that they had found her assailant. Audrey's rape kit was one of the 11,000 untested rape kits discovered by Wayne County prosecutors in 2009 in an abandoned warehouse. Audrey is using her experience to help others, is currently pursuing a graduate degree in mental health counseling at Walden University. She has 2 children, Thurman and Bianca, who is with her today. Bianca? And a dog named Cinnamon. Audrey, you can stay there or you can come up, whichever way.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to say I'm honored to be here, and it's truly a pleasure to participate in a cause that has really had an effect on my life. My name is Audrey Polk, and on February 17, 1997, I was sexually assaulted while at my sister's place. My sister, not the, I really thought I was having a nightmare, but the gun was real, and I'm thinking, this can't be so because both my children lie on each side of me. So I went to the hospital where they performed an examination and built my rape kit, which had gone untested for a long time, as Joe was saying. My kit sat in a lab untested for 14 years. And so I'm sure that you all know my whole life changed after that. Even more so when the officer from the sex crime unit informed me that my son told her, I heard him tell my mama to shut up, and he called her the B word. He was only 6 years old. From that traumatic experience, I lived in fear. I didn't trust anyone, and I even think I developed a case of OCD. That happens easily because I was just constantly checking doors, locking doors, checking windows, and depriving my family of fresh air because I didn't want windows open at my house. So even visiting other people's places, I'd go over their home and, trying to lock their door and go, what's wrong with her? So I was kind of messed up. So one day I got a knock at my door, and the woman says, all I heard was Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, which really threw me for a loop because I didn't know. I was thinking, okay. So I got my nerve and I opened the door and I told her, look, lady, I haven't done anything. She's like, no, we know who raped you 14 years ago. And so I'm looking at her like, shut the front door. Really? It was just amazing how that many years later, someone would find you and reveal some information like that. So that was the day the power of DNA changed my whole life. So, as you all may know, the testing of DNA is a tool that affects social stability in a positive but also a negative way. And I say that because individuals are wrongly convicted of crimes that they didn't commit. So it's really a shame how, law enforcement, it's so easy for them to circumvent the power of DNA. And however, in my case, I'd like to thank all the scientists who diligently dissected DNA to its very nook and cranny, and because it really actually does take a rocket scientist, in my eyes, to figure it out. My rape kit sat for 14 years in a warehouse. I think because of the apathy law enforcement showed towards the power of DNA, and that really made me feel non-existent. There was an entity called Project 400 who randomly selected 400 kits out of 11,000 kits from the backlog. And mine was the first to get a DNA hit. I actually got my life back then. It was the beginning of my healing process. I was able to get closure, and then I can optimize my situation by educating and encouraging other victims and even law enforcement possibly. I even went back to college to study psychology because thank you. My son wouldn't talk to any counselors. So I said to myself, okay, I'll fix you. And I learned new ways to approach him, to get him to talk to me about his anger. And it actually worked, and it still works. So now I have a bachelor's in psychology and soon to have my master's in mental health counseling. Some other thoughts that I wanted to share, because criminals are constantly committing heinous, really unimaginable crimes all around the world. And my thoughts on that, I believe that, I know they have rights, but I don't think they have a right to leniency, because it just seems like the judicial system is very lenient on criminals and just enabling them to commit more violent acts on people who just want to take care of their family and, live in a nice, safe community. And I just think it's really unfair. So, actually, that's basically my story. And I just like to thank each one of you for putting forth your efforts to being agents of social change. And I'm sure in the near future, I'm certain that the ultimate outcome will be progress. Yeah, you guys are great. Thanks.
Thank you, Audrey, for sharing that with us all. We'll hear next from Yvonne Pointer. On December 6, 1984, Yvonne's 14-year-old daughter, Gloria, was abducted, raped, and brutally murdered. 29 years later, on May 12, 2013, an arrest was made after a DNA match was found. That horrific episode in Yvonne Pointer's life has catapulted her into the role of a local, national, and international activist working tirelessly towards safer communities. Yvonne was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, where she has positively impacted countless lives. She's established the Gloria Pointer Scholarship Fund to assist underprivileged students with college. She is also working internationally to raise funds to build a school in Ghana in memory of her daughter, Gloria.
Mommy, speak for me. Mommy, speak for me. Tell the world of the pain that I felt with the blow to my head as he left my body lying in the rain. Mommy, speak for me. Even though my body is not there, please find someone who will listen. There must be someone somewhere. Mommy, speak for me. Not just for me, myself, and I, for there are so many children like myself, Mommy, who just want to know the reasons why. Mommy, speak for me. Was I bad? Did I deserve to die that way? Maybe you can get someone to tell you, Mommy, why children are being abused in this world on today. And Mommy, if they won't listen, don't you hang your head in shame. Just always know that I do love you, Mommy, and you did try just the same. I bring you greetings from Cleveland, Ohio, and in the short time that I have to speak, I want to talk to you briefly about 2 phone calls that forever changed my life. The first phone call came on December 6, 1984, when I received a call that my 14-year-old daughter, who was en route to receive a Perfect Attendance Award, was missing. Now, as any mother, my first thought was, when I see her, I'm going to get her for scaring me like that. Little did I know that she was found beaten and sexually assaulted at the bottom of a filthy, nasty, rat-infested stairwell. Now, I thought, like many of you, that the entire planet would be alarmed over the brutality of her homicide. Little did I know that it would take 29 years to find out who murdered her. I can remember her body was so brutally devastated that it took 3 days for them to prepare her for a viewing. And I went alone to the funeral home, and I stood over her casket, and I said, Gloria, your dying will not be in vain. I'm going to find out who killed you. And of course I thought, well, the police is going to work with me. This is all going to be over in a few days. But I'm thankful to meet a man like Joe at this conference, but I came to tell you that, unfortunately, everybody is not like him. I work with some detectives who felt for some reason she had done something to deserve her demise. So my battle became against them. As a matter of fact, they said to me in one interview that they had someone that they can put her murder on. But they knew he didn't rape her because the DNA did not match. And as I sat in the room, I scratched my head and thought to myself, am I in the twilight zone? Don't you want to know who did it? Or are you just trying to arrest someone because the case was so high profile? So over the years, they kept trying to get me to agree that this individual was the one that murdered her. So finally, I said to the detective, I tell you what, go ahead and charge him. And then in his defense, I'm going to take the stand and repeat our conversation. Well, that made the detective furious. So for many, many years, I was not only looking for a killer, I was watching my back against the detectives assigned to my daughter's case. I went as far as Oprah Winfrey, 6 police chiefs, 4 mayors, and countless presidents. Anytime somebody came into the office, I wanted them to know that there was an unsolved homicide of a 14-year-old girl in the city of Cleveland. Now, unfortunately for Gloria Pointer, she was African American. And I know she was not the national catastrophe, but she was my child, and I was not going to rest until that person who murdered her apologized. So the second call came on May 12, 2013, At that time, there was 3 young ladies missing in Cleveland, you probably heard, and they were restored back to their families, Georgina DeJesus, Amanda Berry. So I was working with that case. And so when they called me to say, come to the office, I thought they had some information about their case. And when I walked in, I saw Gloria's homicide detective sitting at the desk. I said, why are you here? What is this about? They said, we have an arrest in Gloria's case. And so I was able to say to that detective, who tried for 29 years to convince me that someone else had did it, I told you so. They had made a DNA hit, but the problem with that was they had his DNA for 10 years. So that's another thing that Joe and I are going to work on. He said back in 85, 84, they didn't have all the technology. But the young man had went on in 1985, a year after my daughter's homicide, to brutally rape someone else and go on to prison. Now, I need to tell you, for the past 25 years after her homicide, I went into prisons all over the state of Ohio, telling my story, looking for her killer. Do you know that young man was in one of the prisons during my presentations? So I was in search of a killer. I was determined to find him. And when he was finally in court, he stood up and he cried and he said, Miss Pointer, I'm sorry for what I did to your baby. And I said these words to him, I forgive you. I was just waiting on that apology. You see, it's not going to bring her back, but I did have some brochures that I left at some of the tables, and that will tell you how service saved my life. You see, I tried my best to lose my mind. After all, it's too unbearable to have your child raped and murdered. But what kept me sane was being able to help someone else through their pain. So I have a meeting scheduled, Joe, to do a face-to-face with Mr. Hernandez Warren, the person who murdered my child. Because I figured the best way to get inside of the minds of the people who commit crimes is to have conversations with them. You and I would never understand their mindset. So we're scheduled to have a meeting when I come back, hopefully soon, because there's a film being produced about my life story, and we couldn't understand why we couldn't get to the conclusion until after that DNA hit. So he is our perfect ending. So what I wanted to say is Gloria Pointer's death has not been in vain. It is a privilege to stand in your presence. And I want you to know, I don't understand why kids go untested. That's above my ability to comprehend. But I do know it's a lot of families with a lot of murdered children out there who want to know what happened to their child. So if we can just test a kid, or if rape victims, if we can just test a kid, why not do it? So with that said, I know we are going to have time for questions. I do have other children, and I'm just like you. My life is not the same. It's not the same. And even with the arrest, I'm trying desperately to find my life. I don't think these people understand the devastation. I still lock windows, and I still lock doors. What I would like to have is a safe world for children, a life that is free from fear. So if my coming to Miami can help you to encourage people. When I go into the prisons, the young men, I just say to them, it's too costly. So when I was here last night, I'm checking the motel locks. You know, I'm just not the same, and I'm wondering, will I ever be again? But I do know that her dying was not in vain. If one thing I did accomplish, we found out who killed her. Thank you.
Yvonne and Audrey, thank you. That was, those are two incredible stories, and I just want to thank you so much for having the courage to share that with us. I wanted to say that we have runners around. If you have questions, you can write them down on a pad, and then we can bring them forward. Yvonne, could you tell us a little bit about what the media had to do in helping solve your case?
Is this Michael?
Yeah, the mic is on.
Rachel Disso, I would admonish everyone to please Google her. She's a phenomenal writer at the Plain Dealer. Here's another thing I was telling Joe. I was assured for 25 years that glorious information was in CODIS, was in the system. So we had a lot of rapes in Cleveland, and Rachel was doing a lot of background. So my sister said, well, why don't you ask Rachel Disso to see if they actually have a hit on Gloria? I said, no, they've assured me they've done it. She's in the system, there's no need. So my sister insisted, so I did contact Rachel Disso, and I said, Rachel, would you just please check for us? And 3 days after the phone call to Rachel Disso, we had a hit. So we couldn't understand why was I told for 25 years, and she was able, through the media, to find out in 3 days.
Thank you. Joe, have you ever worked with the media in helping solve cases, in particular helping with solving DNA cases?
Yes, we have. Through the years, the media does play an important role, especially in cases where we don't have much investigative leads to begin with. But always remember, from an investigatory point of view, we will never release all information that pertains to that particular case. And I can give you examples where we would make an arrest, and when the person would confess, would give intricate details to the homicide that was never, ever released to the press before. And therefore, our antennas would go up, and we'd be looking at him as the suspect. And with that, just always remember that a lot of suspects read the newspapers, see the news, and they want to become famous as well. So they'll walk into a local police facility and confess to the murder that occurred the night before. So the media plays both sides with it, but I understand the media has a job to do, and they do it quite well.
Audrey, you have 2 children.
Yes.
How has what you've gone through affected how you've gone through your life and raised your children?
Oh, boy. It was very unfair to my children because they couldn't live a child's life because I was afraid. And my son was very angry. As I said, he was 6, and my daughter was just itty-bitty. So she wondered, what it was all about, but eventually we made her aware of what had actually happened. And so she realized why Mom was so like a helicopter mom and overprotective, extremely overprotective, So once they caught him, they gave him 30 to 50 years. And my daughter said, so does that mean I can do this, that, and the other? And I'm like, well, maybe. Yeah.
Yvonne? Same question.
Yes, we share that in common because not knowing destroys your life. I was recently divorced after her homicide, so if someone asked you to even go to a movie, you thought he was the killer. So, he didn't stand a chance, and my children couldn't go 2 feet away from me, so the not knowing wreaks havoc. My other 2 children did turn out pretty decent, but that was only by the grace of God, certainly, because their mother was like an insane person. And then the person that murdered her was from our neighborhood. His father owned a store, and so he had access to a lot of children because they sold candy. As a matter of fact, I'm working with a television show in Cleveland, and we're getting ready to start a show about unsolved cold cases. and we're going to go way back and get some old cases, and who's to say his DNA may even could be a part of some of those, because on my street, it was another 14-year-old girl raped in 1971. So she's the first case that we're going to be looking at.
Joe, one of the questions from the audience, and I think this is a question that we all have when we hear about the huge amounts of rape kits that go untested all around the country. And we just all assume if somebody goes into the hospital and has a kit done, that that's going to get tested right away. Is the cost of testing these kits exorbitant? And why is it that so many all over the country have lied around for so many years?
To answer that, I'll go back to yesterday's lunch that I had with Audrey and Yvonne, and it comes down to that one evil word, money, resources, forensic scientists, manpower, not enough forensic scientists to analyze the kits. I'm proud to say New York, we're up to speed now. We don't have that 17,000 kit rape log. We learned from our mistakes and we corrected that. But nationally, I may have over-admitted, you can't get an accurate statistic now of how many rape kits are sitting on shelves across America because the agencies are fudging the numbers. There's estimates between as low as 200,000 to 400,000 rape kits across the United States. There are certain jurisdictions that are taking the initiative to have this done. Debbie Smith Act, rape kit backlog monies. The money is out there. It has to be requested. You can hire additional resources. You can hire additional forensic scientists to look at these kits and to have these kits analyzed. DNA is in its infancy stages. There are numerous jurisdictions across the United States where they're still only doing DNA on homicides, very rarely on sexual assaults. Absolutely no burglaries, no car thefts, nothing such as that. So it comes down to money, resources, and manpower, basically man and woman power.
I'd like to ask both Audrey and Yvonne, knowing what you know now, all the people out here work with victims. If there is a victim of a rape or a homicide out there, how would you tell the folks out there to help advocate for the victims that they work with, or how would you tell victims that are out there to advocate for themselves?
I guess you could do the advocate for themselves, and then I'll go for the counselors.
Well, as I mentioned, I started off with Mommy Speak for Me because I felt that an injustice was being done to both myself and Gloria by the police in not looking for a killer and trying to convince me that the person who they wanted to put it on. So I think that you should never give up your own independent investigations, if you will. You know, I told Joe when I come back, I'm going to come back as a private detective or something, because I see these injustices, and I know that, in my opinion, Gloria deserved the truth and honesty. And the person that they wanted to put the homicide on, he was already in jail for rape and murder, so it was just throw it on him, you know. And then that would have left this other person to roam the streets. Now, he had been out. My daughter's killer had been out of prison 10 years before they arrested him. And he said every day he waited for the knock on the door. So, I mean, he's out in the street to do everything. And who wants to live in a society where there's a known killer in the city? You should want to find out who did it to get that person off the street. So never, ever stop looking for the person.
Audrey?
Well, for the counselors that work with the victims, first I would say be multiculturally competent, because different people react different ways, different cultures. They, you know, don't believe in sharing certain pain. Know the culture, know how to cater to the culture. Don't be judgmental. Have some humility. And if you're not sure, just consult with a colleague. practice to be unbiased and aware of who you are yourself, and that will make you work well with victims, crisis victims, I believe so.
Joe, when you had to, let's say you had a cold case and you got a hit, how would you approach a victim who, first of all, probably thought that the kit had already been tested? Tell them that it wasn't tested for years and that you have a hit. Was there a way that you approached it? What were some of the things that you had to think about?
That's an excellent question, and I always consider myself and the detectives that I work with, we work for the victims. That's how we look at each and every case. And my personal expertise is in forensics, and I work hand in hand with the Special Victims Unit, which was the sex crimes detectives. They ultimately will notify the victims personally. However, there were a number of cases that I did personally get involved with, both from sexual assault cases and from homicides, where a case has been lingering for years, and through the power of DNA, we now could provide closure to that individual. And I met these people because at the crime scene itself, they're not permitted in, but back at the police precinct, I spoke to a number of these victims, and you take it to heart. And I give them my business card. They reach out to me. We try to keep open a open line of communication. But it is a wonderful feeling, not only on my end, to see the jubilation in one's eyes and the relief that provide closure, just like what Yvonne and Audrey was saying. And that's why we do what we do, and is to try to solve these cases to make those women and families more at peace.
We have to end there. Can we get a round of applause for our panel? I want to thank you all for coming, for participating, for being such a great audience, for coming from all over the country. We're going to be in touch with you over the next several weeks, sending you additional information. Please be in touch with us. Send us your ideas. If you have ideas for workshops for next year, please send those forward. We're here to serve you. As we always say, we support those who support victims. And please have a safe flight or drive back, and come next year to California. Have a good time.